Hello friends, welcome to this video. If you are here, I assume that you want to get better at testing. Even if you don't want the 100% test coverage, you sure want to know how to at least or know the technique to achieve 100% test coverage in your code. Alright, let me show you something quickly. Yesterday when I recorded the full video on how to build the API in Go using test-driven approach, I left something intentionally, and that is what I'm about to show you today. When I go ahead and run the code right now with coverage, you are going to notice that, for example, this user.go, which we are going to use as an example today, we have 88.2% statement covered. And let's look at the code. As you can see, the parts that are not covered are basically like internal server error, which is coming from this create user method, which is in our store. We have a similar case right here. This case as well. This is coming from a create token method from a different object or a different contract. So how do you test things like this? It's really important because, for example, this JWT package, we also have testing for it. So if I go ahead and run the test there, replace, you see we have 74% coverage. But the most important thing I want to show you is some technique. How do you test to achieve 100% test coverage with mocking without using any mocking libraries? In this code today, we are not going to use any mocking libraries. I have used mmock. I use it every day at my work, and it's fantastic. But today, why don't we try to do the mocking ourselves? And that is what I'm about to show you. Now that we know what we are here for, let's get started. Just a quick overview of the code is quite straightforward. We have this code here. I'm going to run the test again one more time. Now, this is the code that we want to cover. This is the previous test, which is very straightforward. For the create user endpoint, we have a table-driven test going on here. A case for the success case, when the JSON is invalid, when our validations are not correct, and of course, we did the regular testing here. If you want to learn how we did all this thing and you have not watched the complete video, you can watch that video. Basically, we made the request to the endpoint, and then we just check for the status code here. Very straightforward, no big deal. So this is what we are about to extend. The thing is, this technique that we are about to learn here today is applicable to any program. When you are building anything, you can use the same technique to achieve, even if it's not 100%, but at least a significant amount of coverage in your code. The first thing I'm going to do is, let's go to the server.go. First thing, let me try to hide this coverage information from the code. Now we are using the struct here, and in the struct we have our dependencies injected. So if we have the store, we have the JWT, these are all interfaces. And this is the beauty of Go. Interfaces allows us to swap out things as we need. There is no need to design to a concrete value where you are struggling to mock things. Since we depend on interfaces, what we can do is to try and enhance this interface. And that is the key word. We are enhancing it. We are not re-implementing all the methods. Look at how many methods we have here. I'm not interested in all the methods. And this is the difference between this approach that we are about to take versus using a library like mmock or any other mocking libraries out there. What I'm about to show you allows you to mock just a subset of your interface, not everything. So I'm going to go to the store. We have Postgres store here. I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call it mock. Why not? And here we are going to call it, create a file called store. Let me correct the spelling. Fantastic. What we want to do, we need a type called mock store. And in this, our mock store, this is the technique. This is very important. I'm going to embed the original store. This is it. When we embed the original store, we are not forced to implement everything, but we can override the existing implementation. So what we want to do, if you go here, we want to, we need a way for, let's run the code so you can have complete understanding of what's going on. We need to force, here, this place, we need to force create user to return an error in order for us to test this portion of the code. Basically, what we are saying here is, if create user returns an error, we want to see 500 eternal server error. And that is exactly what we want to test. So how do we do that? Let's go to the mock. I'm going to start by saying create user fn, which stands for function. If you look at the signature of create user here, this is the signature of create user. We are going to take this and we are going to say is func this. This is really important. I'm going to bring the domain namespace. And of course, we have the same thing here. Right? So this is for create user. So we need a way to instruct the mock to use our store. So how do you do that? We can pretend to have this method in the store. Let me show you how. Let's say we come here, we say func. Let me put M for the mock store. And I will say create user. This same thing here. Create user. Let's take this out. This is what it looks like, right? This is the same function. But this time around, I'm going to say if m dot this function, if it is set, if m dot this is not equal to nil, then what do? We return m dot fn, and then we simply pass it the user. That's it. Or else we return the original one, which we can get from m.store dot create user. Think about this for a second. If we define this function in our test, we go ahead and try to execute this function. That means when this create user is called from the test, we have a way to create a custom implementation right in the test by just passing this signature in. And of course, we have the opportunity to call the main store. And this is the flexibility I'm talking about. Now, in the test, we already have this one working. I'm not going to change that. What I'm going to do is to say func test create user error, something like this. And this is a new test that we want to write specifically to cover that error case. I'm going to create a store. This is the instance. Some people in Go don't like to use the word instance. They say a value of something. So this is a value of type mock store. And then we have the store and we set it to test store. This test store exists here. We already have this from the previous code, so don't worry about that. But here is the fun part. This is our create user fn that we remember we define this property here. And this is what we are going to do. We are going to say function, and this is the same signature. Basically, we can now return nil and errors.new, error creating user. This is going to force the store to use this one since we have defined it. Now, time to do what? Time to run the code. We can go here. Let me close this once. We can copy over this. So let's copy over this setup. We can go and copy like a body from here just to save us some time. We are sending this body. The body is correct. Everything looks good. This is a valid JSON, right? So we have the store configured. We have our test server, and this is our server instance. Nothing unusual. Then our response error is the test server.client, and then we do .post. What is the URL is going to be test server URL, and then we just pass the plus API slash v1 slash user slash create. Make sure you type it correctly. What else? Application, that's the type that you are sending, the data type you are sending. We need to pass post. We need to pass an IO reader. Let's convert this body to an IO reader, which is strings.new reader, and then we just pass the body. Great. At this point, we are almost done. So if error is not new, we can stop the test here. Else, if HTTP status internal server error is not equal to res, so what we expecting versus what we got. And I can say error, expecting 500 errors, expecting 500 status code, got, and we can do this. This is the fun of doing everything yourself, because then you have error F. Then you have a complete understanding of what you are doing. Now, this is the new server. If you look at it, our server requires a store. So we need to put in this store here. That way, our server is going to first of all go to the store, and our store is configured. For example, when the create user method is called, we try to execute this one, which we have overwritten here. For example, if we don't set it at all, it's going to call the original one. And then let's go ahead and run the code now with coverage. We're passing, and look at, we are at 94%. And when you go into the create user method, you see that we are now covering this part of the code. Fantastic. I don't know about you, but this feels really, really good. How do we get to 100%? Now, this is another one. JWT, this is a different store entirely. So let's work on this as well. Just like we did for the user store, we are going to do something similar for the JWT interface. So let's go ahead and do that. The JWT is stored in a security package, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going to create a file here called mock JWT. Great. Same approach. I'm going to create a new type called mock JWT struct. We are going to embed the original one, same way. And then what do we want to mock? We want to mock this very one. So I'm going to copy it. First, I'm going to bring it down here because we need to implement it. Then I'm going to say create token fn is going to be of type a function that has this same signature. And that's about it. we need to, of course, have the main namespace. Let me close this part of the code and look at it. Same approach, same technique. What next? We need to implement this func m for this. Then let's do m for this one to make it a pointer. We need to, of course, put this. Right. Let me close this side of the code so we can see it very well. Everything looks good. Basically the same thing. If, let me see what we, okay, if this is not equal to nil, I think there's a problem somewhere. Right. This is m.this, right? The formatting. If it's not equal to nil, we do the same thing. We return this, pass it the user and the duration. That's it. Else, we return the original one, which is going to be m.jwt, create token, user, duration. This flexibility is still good because sometimes we can switch between the mock and the original one. This is really important. Now it's time for us to go into the test and update it. The first thing I want to do is, so this is the recent test. Let's try to close this one out. I want us to go back to our code and see what is going on. Now we are at the login, and this is where we are. We need to create a token for this user. So I'm going back to the user test, and this is the user login. I need to close that. And if you look at this is the user login, right? Look at the test. At the moment, we have the name, we have the expected code, we have the this body, check body, and I want to add the JWT. So JWT and domain.jwt. This is it, right? Then this is going to help us switch between the mock and the original one. Here I'm going to do this. This is internal. It's good we pick the success case. This is the success case. Make sure I pick it correctly. This we expect internal server error. We need the JWT, and it's going to be JWT, right? What do we need? We already have this is the original JWT is going to be somewhere here, this one. I'm going to reading that one, so I'm going to say JWT. So let's overwrite it with the original implementation. And then what else here? This one. And that's it. At the moment, we need to return something. I'm just going to return nil and errors.new, error creating token. Something like this should be enough. But if you think about it, at the moment, we are currently not taking advantage of this because we just added it and the store that which we are using is currently depend on the old JWT. So how do we change this? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Let's start by moving everything from here. Now we need to update our code to adapt to the new changes. We have all the test cases we want to test for. Let me close these guys up, close them. All right. Good. Now we can see better. I'm going to paste it. I need to add some conditions here. If the JWT is not set, that is when we want to set it. Right. And then if it is not set, that means if we are not using the mock, we want to use the real one. And here, of course, we're using the JWT at this point. This error now needs to change to this. That's about it. I'm going to, I don't know where, it's like we're missing something somewhere. Okay, this is interesting. We no longer have this. We no longer have this. So I can ignore this because we are going to use this one anyway. So this won't be nil, and that means this part is not going to execute. We should be fine. We need to, this was the last one we copied over. So we need to change this to internal server error, right? And that's it. Let's go ahead and run the code and see what is passing now versus what is failing. And everything seems to pass, and it is 100% coverage. All right, let's do a quick recap. We started by looking at our test. So this was our test. Our test relies, we had about 80% coverage, right? And most of our tests rely heavily on the original store. So for example, let's take, let's open the one we just wrote, this one. For example, we had this, there was no mock store. So we were forced to use the real store, which is this one. This one is connecting to a real database. In short, this is connecting to Postgres directly here. But we needed a way to override. This override that we have here is very important. We need a way to override this create user method. And that is why we created a mock store, and then we have a way, this what you can call like an anonymous function helps us override each time that we want to use it. We can dynamically change the behavior of this. And that is the most fun part of this. You can set up this. We see we are not using any external libraries. We have been able to work with, we have worked with two different stores. We work with this JWT here. We also work with the store from here. This is the main store. We also work with this as well. So two different approaches from, it doesn't have to be database. The JWT has nothing to do with database. But this is how you mock your API, your testing, anything that you want to do. And I think it's a fantastic and really powerful approach. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe, and thank you.